Hello, everybody. Today we are going to have a webinar about Teachers Talking Time, TTT. We're going to discuss today how to use it productively. My name is Alexandra Lenova. I have 10 years of teaching experience and I have been working here in Skyeng for more than 2 years. I'm a senior expert in our Teachers Training Center. And today we're going to discuss the following points. First of all, we are going to discuss why TTT is one clue to many problems, what general strategy can we apply to improve our TTT, what solutions can be applied to improve it, and then we will discuss some positive sides of TTT. So, we always want to reduce our teachers' talking time, but let's talk what is so bad about high TTT. Well, actually, if the teacher talks too much, the lessons become really boring because we have to admit that for students, it is not always interesting to listen to the teacher's stories, to the teacher's lectures about grammar. So the students can be really bored. And the students can be overwhelmed with tasks and exercises in the lesson. So again, they don't have an opportunity to talk. They are bored, tired, and the teacher only gives instructions again and again. Also, students don't speak enough if teacher talks too much. And as a result, there is no progress in the students' skills, and students give up studying, and because they don't see any progress, they are discouraged, demotivated, and they just stop. And this is the most negative impact. And also here, I'd like to say that TTT is a tool for studying, but it is not a material for studying, for example. So we just help our students to study with the help of our talking time. How much TTT is considered to be a norm? Actually, roughly it is from 20 to 40%. But here I'd like to notice that if it doesn't mean that if the teacher talks 20%, the student talks 80% of the time. We have got the third part here, and it is silence. So we can say that TTT roughly is from 20 to 40, plus we have students talking time from 40 to 70, and then we have this gap for the silence when students read something by themselves, when we watch the video, for example, or listen to the recording. So we have this silent time too. If TTT is higher than 40%, it indicates the lack of practice opportunities for a student. It means that the student doesn't talk enough. If TTT is lower than 20%, it indicates that a teacher is too passive and only students' monological speech is practiced. And we are aimed at the conversation, at the dialogue, but not pure monologue. In the lesson, sometimes there are the situations when our TTT goes up, and sometimes we even don't notice them. So one of them is unclear instructions. When our instructions are unclear, we have to repeat them again, and it causes the irritation of both the teacher and the student because he doesn't understand, and teacher is irritated too because the student doesn't understand. So we have to avoid these situations, we have to mind them. Another situation is when teachers talk too much about their experience. And by too much, I mean that, for example, the teacher wants to share his personal experience of how English has been useful for him in the recent trip. And it is not like a short input like, oh, I have a situation, and where we can ask some follow-up questions, such as, what about you? Do you have this experience? Or have you ever had this experience? Or do you want to try this? But it is just a 15 minutes lecture, and the teacher is talking and talking using some unknown words and phrases without grading the language. So this is a situation when TTT goes up and the student can be really bored because maybe the student doesn't comprehend half of the speech. Another situation is when teachers repeat their own or students' phrases, but not like echoing because we want to mark a mistake and to attract students' attention. But, for instance, the student says, I read an extremely interesting book yesterday, and the teacher is looking through the exercises at the platform and says, I read a very interesting book yesterday. I see. And he continues talking. So it is really unproductive because we just say the same phrase. Oh, it increases our TTT. It doesn't give anything to the student. So we should mind this too. Sometimes we really do it unconsciously, but this is one of the situations. Another situation is when teachers translate without students' request. How does it happen? Well, actually, the teacher pronounces the phrase, then just the next moment, not even the second, but moment, the teacher thinks, oh, this pre-intermediate student can't know this phrase, I better help him, and translate. But it is really not positive, it is really negative because the teacher doesn't give a chance to a student even to guess. So he just gives this information, but maybe the student didn't need it, or the student could guess the word, but we didn't give a chance. So we better make a pause and wait before we say something in Russian in the first language when we translate. And it also increases our TTT, of course. Another situation is lengthy explanations of grammar rules. So if these rules are like a lecture, the student can be easily distracted. Even if he listens attentively, he can grab some example and start thinking. He has his own associations, and now he is far away from our present perfect explanation. Now, oh great, it's over, I haven't understood anything. So we better use some guided discovery techniques, make it more as a conversation, make our student involved into the conversation so he doesn't have a chance to be distracted. And also, if it is a dialogue and not a monologue, it decreases our TTT. And the same thing is about lengthy explanations of new lexemes, of new vocabulary. If this explanation is too long, the student can easily forget the initial word, or if we use some words and phrases that are known to the student, well, this explanation is not really productive and we spend more time on explaining, and it really increases our TTT. Another situation is when we overcorrect students' mistakes. It leads to interruptions. Again, it discourages the student, and the student doesn't want to talk. He thinks that all that he is doing is just making mistakes. So we better mind this and remember that when we overcorrect, it increases our TTT too. So I'd like to introduce a general strategy how to find previous situations in your lessons. Maybe you really do it, but you don't notice. It's like unconscious things. So a good idea is to listen to the recordings of your own lessons, and this is a painful part because we all know it's a little bit awkward. So you can use the previous like material as a checklist. Well, do I make any mistakes? Do I overcorrect mistakes? No, great. Oh, my grammar explanation is too long, so I better avoid it. This way we find the area or areas for improvement, and after that we apply the solutions that we are going to discuss further. And it's a really good idea to repeat these actions after you have applied the solutions, just to check, is everything good, or do we need to improve something else? And actually now we are moving to the practical part, if we can say so. We are going to discuss solutions that we can apply. So first situation that I'd like to discuss is giving instructions. We all know that instructions have to be really short, really clear, and we have to give them one at a time. But it is easier to be said than done. So I'd like to set an example of instructions. Here is the task to the student in the upper intermediate course, general, and I can agree that most of our upper level students, then they can easily understand what to do, and sometimes they even don't need instructions. But we have to be very caring about our low levels, because it's really complicated for them to start studying. They are afraid of making mistakes, and they have to be confident about at least instructions. They have to have this comfort zone. So we better do the following. Again, short, clear, and one at a time. Right? So we can say, read the words, and we wait till the student does it. Read the sentence, and the student does it. Then we check understanding, like, what is heaven? What do the cooks do? What do the mechanics do? So we check that all the words here are clear for our students. Fill in the gaps with the words, and the student does it, and then answer the questions. So you can see that my instruction is given step by step. I wait till the student does this or that. This way, I don't have to repeat it. I don't have to explain it. The student does what I need just from the very first time. And also, if you are not sure about giving instructions, you can apply the following strategy. You can look through the tasks before the lesson. You use private notes to write the instructions there step by step. And don't forget that it is really important to grade your language according to the student's level. With low levels, it is a good idea to pre-teach all the words like read, listen, watch, and so on, and use them when you give instructions. So you avoid using L1 this way, and the student will feel comfortable and confident that he knows these words. So you grade, and with the students of the higher levels, you can, for example, use some more complicated words, but again, pre-teach them if we talk about instructions. Then you can reread the instruction and pay your attention. Is it simple? Is it clear enough for your low levels especially? And only after that you can use these instructions in the lesson. So I think it really saves time of the lesson and decreases your TTT. After a couple of weeks of giving instructions this way, it will be clear for you and you can give them on the spot. But it's a good practice. You can make your students feel really, really more comfortable. So moving further, I'd like to discuss a situation when we ask a question. and silence is the answer. The student doesn't say anything, he is really silent, and teachers start thinking, oh my God, the question is too complicated. I need to use other words, maybe a little bit simpler, to ask the same question. And the teacher does it. Then the student is still silent, and we start thinking, maybe I can answer myself and set an example so the student can have a clue and can start answering. But actually, what happens in a real life situation? And again, it is more about low levels, but it can be about higher levels too, of course. So we have to admit that when we ask some questions about some issues, the student haven't thought about them for a long time, or maybe they have never thought about them, such as environmental problems, or what is your favorite composer, or have you ever been to, I don't know, casino? So they need some time to think, to remember, to recall. Then they need some time to make their opinion, if it is an opinion question. They need some time to find the words in English to express their opinion. And of course, like at the beginning, they needed some time to comprehend the question. And then only after all this time, they are ready to answer. So if we start asking other questions, they need to comprehend them again. And it takes time again. It distracts from the main question. If we start answering ourselves, they think, okay, teacher knows the answer. Why do I need to answer? Oh, this answer is really well, so I can say, yeah, I agree. And like nothing more. So the main strategy here is don't answer yourself, really give some time to think. And I guess if you have your student for some time, you can understand whether the student is struggling with something or whether the student is thinking. So if you see that the student has some problems, we can politely ask, like, do you need my help? How can I help you? Is everything clear? Are all the words clear? Maybe we need to translate some words that are not clear for you, work with them. So we do this and we don't answer ourselves. That is kind of a golden rule, okay? Let's move further, and here we talk about mistakes correction. When we want to correct our student, please remember that there are, in general, two types of speaking, for fluency and for accuracy. So if the student is talking for fluency, please don't interrupt him, because it's the point, like to make our students speak. The best strategy here that we can apply is to type the mistakes in the private notes, and then when the student finishes his talk, we can show these mistakes to him and ask, do you think this phrase is correct? Do we use this tense in this sentence? And so on. We just ask these questions because the main idea of the mistakes correction is not to give the correct answer, but to make our student analyze their mistakes, revise some grammatical points, and not to give just the correct answer that will be forgotten the next moment. Also, it's very important to remember that we don't correct all the amount of mistakes, because if we correct all mistakes with our low levels, they just stop talking. As far as there can be a lot, we correct the mistakes that the student knows, right? So the topic that the student have learned. Because if we correct other mistakes, we need to explain this grammar rule. These mistakes can be a very good clue to our further work, like, okay, I see that you have a weak point here. So next lesson, we're going to have a look at our degrees of comparison, for example, or at past simple tense, whatever. But we don't correct them. We just take them into account. If we talk about talking for accuracy, here we need to work with our target grammar, target vocabulary. So we need to attract students' attention somehow when he makes a mistake during his speaking task. So we can say something like, before the student starts talking, like, well, if you make the mistake in the grammar rule that we have just learned, or in some specific topic, present simple ascending, I will show you something. I have got a circle today. It can be a pen, a pencil, you can wave, you can set some special signs like this is about talking about the past, this is the mistakes in the future tense. So whatever, we can use some miming, not really, or set face, whatever. But first you set this rule, because it would be a little bit weird if you start moving when the student is talking, and it can distract even more. So you set and then you apply. You have this agreement with the student, but please don't interrupt and use your notes to show the mistakes to the student. Let him analyze his speech. We are moving to another part, and here it is grammar explanation. When we talk about grammar, we can say that the solutions that we have discussed about our giving instructions, we can apply them too. First of all, we have to plan our grammar explanation, look through the exercises, think what method you are going to use today. Maybe it is a guided discovery, preferable, or maybe some other types like TTT or PPP, so whatever. Then the language of explanation has to be simpler than what you explain. Really, you have to simplify it as possible. Like, we have to admit that our students, they are very far from, most of them are very far from grammatical terms and grammatical principles. So here we explain as simple as possible. We don't overuse grammar terms such as gerund, past participle, conditionals. Of course, if your student comprehends these terms, that's great. Use them. But if you know that this is another struggling point for your students, don't. Simplify. Don't overuse. Use guided discovery techniques. You can learn more about them if you visit our workshop teaching grammar, or just Google for and read about them. But I can say that this is a kind of a dialogue, a conversation. The student, you help the student to make his own rule. Then you can correct it a little bit, ask more questions, but it is definitely not a lecture. It is extremely important to use visuals to present new structures such as notes and board, because it's very complicated for the student to comprehend with listening only. So we have to demonstrate, to have some examples to show this rule on. We can use some CCQs to check the understanding of grammar. Not like, is it clear? And not everybody will say no, really, not really. Usually people say yes, and then it appears that the next lesson we have to relearn this grammar again. And again, to talk about CCQs, it's a good idea to visit our workshop dedicated to them. If you're still not sure about your grammar explanations, you can Google for some YouTube videos where, for example, CELTA teachers explain grammar to their students, and you can grab some ideas for your explanations and apply in your classroom. So the simpler, the better. It's the golden rule here, and it will really decrease your TTT a lot. You will speak less, but more productively. Well, so now I'd like to emphasize some positive sides of TTT. And first of all, we have to remember that TTT is one of the key teaching instruments that must be used wisely. We really can be the only source of language input for our students, so we always have to think what and how we say. It is a real tool that helps us to work. We apply it really wisely. We grade language, we simplify it. We remember that we have student-centered lessons. But we have also remembered that a good conversation leads to good relationships with your students. And as a result, we have a higher retention. So if your student asks you, and what about you? How was your weekend, for example? We shouldn't stay like, TTT, I won't tell you, I mind my TTT. We can share, but we have to remember that it is definitely not a lecture. I mean, the answer to the question. It's just a little phrase, sentence. You can share what you want with your student, but we mind the balance about your teacher's talking time and students' talking time. We need to use our TTT productively. That's the main idea. It's not a chat room, you know, it's a classroom. Well, as to summarize our talk, I'd like really to remember, we listen to our lesson or lessons, we analyze the problem, we apply the solutions offered in this workshop, and you can always come back to this link and watch this video again. We keep working on our TTT. It means that we can listen to our lessons one more time to check if everything is okay. We grade the language, we simplify our explanations. We remember that we have students-oriented, student-centered lessons. And please don't forget that TTT can be a very powerful tool if used wisely. Well, thank you for watching this video. And you have to continue to move to the workshop where we are going to apply these solutions, where we have practice before you use them in your lessons. So you follow the link that you continue this Google form. You do the test. It's not really long. It takes about 10 minutes. And the answers are simple. You just refresh the material of this webinar. Then you choose the date of the workshop. The link will be sent automatically to the email that you've left in the form. And you follow the link in the email. So you will join the Skype chat. I will meet you there and we will move to Zoom to have our practice. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to text me via Skype. And thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.